Hello, guys, and welcome to the Husband Help podcast, where you are going to learn how to be the best husband that you can be, no matter what your marriage is like right now. Today, we are going to be talking about why it matters that you, the husband, the man in your relationship, why it matters that you are the one casting the vision, being proactive, pouring in love, even when maybe there's been a mutual abandonment of that love in the relationship. In other words, we're going to be talking about why it is I would say that you, as the husband, should lead your marriage. Now, this is a follow up to our last episode. In the last episode, we talked about two specific types of goals that you should have. We talked about destination goals, knowing where you're going to, the thing that you're trying to get to. But we also talked about journey goals. And I talked about how those are the sort of things that many men miss because we get so fixated on accomplishing the thing that we forget how we want to be as we accomplish it. Now, today we're going to be developing this idea even further in its application to marriage because what we're talking about is that there is, in fact, a difference between men and women, and that one of the ways that those differences manifests is that it falls upon you as the man to be the force of proactivity in your marriage. And I don't really care what label you put on that reality. You can call it leadership, you can call it something else if you don't like that word. But there is this proactive necessity for you as a man if you want to be in a healthy, enjoyable marriage. We're going to talk about why that is. And so let me say it very clearly. Here's my thesis. Your wife is more likely to leave the marriage than you are. That's just the fact, and the statistics show that that is, in fact, true. However, and this is what we'll talk more about, I argue that this also means that she is more primed to respond to your leadership, your efforts in the marriage than you realize. So we're going to talk about this. And again, this is all coming off of my observations of the 10 plus years of actually seeing inside actual marriages, how they break down and why, and what it looks like, what the objections are, what the difficulties are as that process unfolds. Now, if you've been around, I mean, really, if you've been in the culture at all, if you've been online at all, maybe you've seen publicly people get divorced. You'll see a couple that gets divorced, and you might hear this line. A wife decides to leave 2 years before she does. A husband decides to leave when there's another woman. Now, obviously, this is not a very kind phrase to husbands. It is a probably erring on the side of misandrist to say it. However, I can recall, I mean, golly, just a couple of years ago, there was a couple on YouTube that my wife follows, does some organizational type content, and she announced that she was getting divorced from her husband. No clear reasons why, other than that she was unhappy and she felt that he was not putting in enough effort into the marriage. And of course, the comments for her videos were just completely peppered with actually this exact quote over and over and over again, different people chiming in to validate and verify that this was a reality that is just how things work, unfortunately, between men and women. So, clearly there is this recognition when it comes to why women are justified in leaving, that there's a difference between men and women. I personally, from my experience, have a hard time buying into the second part of the statement. I think that it might be true that a husband decides to leave when there's another woman, but the fact that you're not seeing there is that actually women also leave when there's another man, and that is that is the unfortunate reality. And I would say amongst my clients, again, exclusively men who want to save their marriage and their wife doesn't, uh, infidelity plays a role in at least a third. At least a third. There is an emotional affair, and that's just the ones that we know about, right? And again, I don't think it's like extremely more than that. I do think it's probably about that amount. So again, this is not a small amount. Infidelity is just a problem. People don't have good boundaries over their relationships. Emotional affairs, particularly, are very dangerous and happen way more often than you would think. Um, Unfortunately, however, I will say this statement of a wife decides to leave 2 years before she actually does. I think that does bear out. And what exactly that means, we're going to unpack because, again, if we look at statistics, we can see, and I'll make sure that there's a link for where I got this stat from. If you go to the show notes for this, if you go to husbandhelphaven.com/episode 33, so that's episode hyphen 33. For one, there'll be a one sheet, free, no email required, just a PDF one sheet that talks about everything that we've talked about in this episode. But for two, I'll make sure and link to this stat. But the stat is that women leave their marriage at a rate of about 2 to 1 for men. So if we just look at all divorces filed in the States, at least in the US, um, the proportion is approximately 67-ish% of those divorces are filed by the wife. So there is something to this idea. And I think that a lot of times, men, when they hear this statistic, and I'll be honest, I have had similar thoughts myself, I think it's easy to look at this and think, golly, there is a commitment problem for women. There's this cultural issue for women. And there may be some of that. We'll touch on more of that later. But I I actually think that even though it is true that wives are more likely to leave, I think that it is also undeniably true that men, husbands, are much less likely to be interested in improving the marriage, at least until crisis hits. And I can't tell you how many guys I've had who've, again, come and told me this exact sentiment, which is, I wish I'd had this information years ago. I'm very sure I wouldn't be here if I did, but they didn't look for it. And they're regretting that they didn't, but they didn't, right? And again, if you again, you don't have to be like a rocket scientist or like a statistician to understand or get a sense that when you look around the relationship industry, the marriage help industry, what you're going to find is that the amount of content that is made for women exclusively, targeted to women, targeted to the wife, is probably about as much as the entire sum of all the content made for men exclusively and for couples, right? There's just a disproportionate interest from women, from the female gender, in improving their relationship. There is a much higher interest, and that is why there is much more content about it. That's right, supply and demand. It's pretty basic stuff. So again, whatever is going on beneath the surface for why that is, I think we can agree that this is a reality, that this is an actual pattern. I personally think that what ends up happening is that us as guys, our sort of our problem-solving nature works against us sometimes to where we're really good at understanding the most pressing thing that needs to be done, of identifying that problem and putting out the fire or coming up with the strategy or doing the thing to solve the big problem that needs to be solved. And yet, we might be in a marriage where it's never going to be that big problem. It's going to be this low level, slow burn discontent that never quite rises to the level of, I need to put my attention on it. But then we fall into this pattern of apathy and flatness and discontent. And sometimes the wife even speaks up during this time and says, I'm not very happy. We need to do something about this. And yet still, that doesn't quite get the movement happening. And there's that saying, squeaky wheel gets the grease. And yet very few guys stop to think, I actually don't want my marriage to become that squeaky wheel. It is not a pleasant thing when my marriage gets to be that sort of problem in my life. So I think that, again, I'm just theorizing here about how it can be that men get into this very stubborn sort of entrenched place. But there's a flip side to this, one way or another. Again, you don't have to agree with the theory or all that stuff, but I'll say, if it is true that your wife has been historically more invested in saving the marriage, or not in saving the marriage, but in improving the marriage or in being happier in the marriage, and now she's leaving, what is true is that she may be more primed to respond to genuine change than you think. Because, let me make this very clear, your wife has not chosen to leave because she doesn't care about the marriage. She actually is choosing to leave because she stopped believing it could be better. And that is a key thing to understand. It is not that she just decided one day, I don't care about this commitment anymore. There is a belief problem. It's not a commitment problem. Okay. Now, we've talked about this paradox of, even though wives are more likely to leave, they're also more interested in improving their marriage. What a strange thing. Now let's talk a little bit more why that equals out to you as the man need to take the initiative in your marriage. When the marriage has gone cold, when the goodwill has dried up, when the trust has been damaged on both sides, the husband has more capacity, more capability to restart the flow of those good things we want in the relationship on his own than the wife does if she's doing it on her own. In other words, if we're in this desert of a marriage and there's no good stuff coming in, the wife trying to nourish the barren ground of that marriage relationship all by herself in hopes that it will lead to change is a very futile effort, oftentimes, because men are so good at adapting to and being content in a desert. And on the flip side, I will say, a when it is the husband who is saying, "Look, we're in the desert right now. Neither of us are putting in anything, but I'm going to take it upon myself to pour into this relationship first." I believe there's more capability, more likelihood that that's going to inspire a response from the wife than the other way around. Okay. So that's one way of explaining this dynamic that I'm getting at. Again, this is not about capability. This is not about worth as human beings. This is just about how masculine and feminine energy pair up in a marriage relationship. Let me put it in different terms though. Let me put it in another way. Like imagine that you and your wife are in bed, okay, not doing anything crazy. We're just in bed at the end of the day. We're watching Netflix, we're doing whatever it is. It's late, the sun's down, kids are in bed, things are quiet in the neighborhood, and yet you hear someone knocking on the door. Someone comes up, starts pounding on the door. Which one of you is going to go answer the door? And why? I think for most couples, it would be that the man is the one to get up from bed, get himself together, prepare himself however he needs to prepare himself, and then go check the door. Maybe you check your camera and you can see who it is, and so you don't know, right? Maybe this analogy is a little too anachronistic. I don't know, but the point still stands. Let me use a different example. Maybe there's the dog made a mess all over the carpet, right? And it's the middle of the night. Who's going to get up and do that? Again, not every single time, not for every single couple, but for a lot of couples, that would just implicitly fall into the husband's lap. Hopefully not literally, but figuratively. Okay, yeah, I know. The gross thing, I'll go do that, right? The hard thing, I'll go do that. The sort of dangerous thing, I'll go do that. It's just natural. And so all I'm saying is that when we come into marriage, that there is some similar dynamic that applies. That just as it is that in these situations where there's physical unknowns, physical dangers, physical hard stuff, it is natural, chivalrous for the husband, for the man to take care of those things. So too, there is, whether you recognize it or not, a natural expectation that the husband, that the man, has some semblance of proactive presence in his marriage relationship. So if you don't want to call it leadership, fine, and call it complementarian. If you don't like that, you can call it authority. If you don't like that, you can just call it proactive. I don't care. I don't care what you call it, as long as you understand this dynamic exists. It is real. And you might say to me, look, Stephen, my wife is very type A. She's the breadwinner. I actually am the caregiver in my relationship. So this can't apply to me. My wife would not like it if I decided I needed to be a leader in our relationship. Well, my friend, all I can tell you is that my mother was a physician. She was the breadwinner, and my dad was a stay-at-home dad. And I would say that this very same principle applied to them. Why? Because a type A wife doesn't have lower expectations for her husband. She doesn't desire less from him. She actually probably has higher. If anything, she has higher expectations, higher desire to see him step up. In fact, she might even think to herself, golly, I'm doing the things that the masculine usually does. What is he doing? There's maybe this open-ended question of, how are you pulling your weight? So again, I'm not saying that that's fair, that that's right. I'm just saying it's there. And let's just play this out a little bit further. Let's just say, okay, you know what? You completely disagree with me and you're not going to take on this mantle of leadership. What's going to happen in your relationship? Well, there's going to be one of two things, because relationships need to have some sort of leadership presence. Somebody has to be proactive. Somebody has to be scanning the horizon to see what's coming and if we're going where we want to go. And so one of two things is going to happen if you don't do that in your relationship. Either she's going to take that leadership role, and over time, she's going to feel more like your mother or your roommate than your wife. And that leads to resentment, probably not just on her end, but on yours too, because you don't like her being in that role either. You wish for more. When she feels like your roommate, you want more intimacy. When she feels like your mother, you want more freedom. So you don't want her taking on that leadership in that way. And on the flip side, if nobody takes the leadership role, if we really just say, look, there's the wheel, nobody touch it. Nobody touch it. what's going to happen is that the marriage stagnates. You're going to drift. You're not going to know where you're going. Both of you are going to be surprised at how unhappy you are. And you're going to go again from loving partners to loveless roommates. And both of you are going to feel like the victim. So I'm telling you this. I'm not making this up. I've seen this play out. I've seen this play out, not just in one situation, but over and over and over again. And both patterns trace back to just this absence of intentionality or this abandonment of proactivity, not on both part, not on the wife's part, sometimes those, but specifically on the part of the husband. So again, you think back to what we talked about of why she left and this fact that women leave marriages more than men do. I hope you're starting to believe me when I say whatever the amount of actual justification for her decision. And again, if you're a Christian, you might be able to say completely, honestly, sincerely, truthfully, it is true. She does not have biblical grounds for divorce. Even if you're not a Christian, you might say it is not right. It's not fair. It's not good. The cost of this divorce is not worth what she's getting. I can see that. She disagrees. She won't see it, but I can see that. Whatever your thoughts about her justification, I hope you can see that she's not leaving because she woke up one day and stopped caring about the marriage. She's leaving because she stopped believing change was possible, or she stopped believing happiness was possible. What does this mean for you? It means that if you're not separated, kindness goes a long way. Proactivity goes a long way. Start building a track record of caring about forward progress in your marriage now. Because that's the thing. Again, it's not about the marriage was not perfect. The marriage was less than perfect, so I'm leaving it. That's not the justification for a wife leaving so many times. It's the marriage was unhappy and he didn't care. That's the justification. So you don't have to become perfect to prevent this dynamic from festering in your marriage. All you have to do is something, is care, is be proactive, is seek change, seek to solve the tensions, seek to achieve the growth before the crisis hits. Start showing her now that you can change on things, that you're open-minded to her, that you're willing, that you're capable of hearing feedback and adjusting, that you don't go into defense mode every time, that you don't go into finger-pointing mode every time. Yeah, I'm doing this, but you're doing this. We don't do that every time. We can just say, you're right. I should do better. And then we do, or we try, at least. Now, I know a lot of you guys listening to this, you're in separation. You're in marriage crisis right now. Maybe you're not in separation, but things are rough. I want you to understand this. If you take nothing away from this episode, take away this. The problems in your marriage are not rooted in her commitment problem. They are rooted in her damaged beliefs about the marriage. Now, she may have damaged those beliefs herself. She may have done things to poison those beliefs. She might have listened to people who corrupted those beliefs. But the problem at the core, at the root of all of this is she doesn't believe the marriage can change or that it can bring her the thing that she feels is important for her. What that means is even if she's saying to you, she's very checked out, divorce is a certainty, all the same, you will be working against that root cause for her leaving when you do one thing starting now: change. When you prove to her that you are willing and open to change, that you will grow, that you will not be stagnant, that even if she continues on this progress towards divorce, if she continues going that way, you still are going to seek change in yourself. You are going to seek growth in yourself. Please hear me. I'm not saying just do the right things and she'll come back. I'm not promising an outcome here. I'm not saying perform so that she notices. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that your walk is a lot more important than your talk right now. Your talk can't do anything for you. Your walk still can, even if you think it can't. Real change, done for the right reasons, is the thing that's most attractive, that incentivizes reconnection, and that has the greatest long-term likelihood of getting to reconciliation. Because what are we doing? We are saying, you believe, I can't change, we can't change. Happiness can't change. Sadness can't change. Disappointment can't change. Where they're at is fixed. Your only recourse is divorce. Well, guess what? We're not divorced yet, but I am changing. And even when that divorce seems like it's continuing, I'm going to keep changing. So what you need to actually do, again, this is especially for you guys who are maybe early in separation, stop the bleeding. That's priority number one. Stop these push away behaviors. Stop the desperate behaviors. No more begging, no more pressuring, no more guilt tripping, no more monitoring her, no more trying to measure like how close or far she is from deciding to come back to the marriage every single day or every single conversation. Stop all that. That's not proactive. That's reactive. Okay. Instead, focus on getting yourself stable. She can't reconnect to chaos, and you can't make the most of the things that are under your control if you can't even control yourself, right? So, before you can lead, before you can really apply your proactive energy in a good, impactful way, you need to become somebody worth reconnecting to. And you need to understand, you need to pull apart your ego and your insecurity from who you actually want to be and who it matters for you to be as a man. And then I want you to start trying to build goodwill in the relationship with no expectation of reciprocity, nothing getting paid back in return, not even movement towards reconciliation. And yet, all the same, you're going to increase in kindness, you're going to increase in consideration, you're going to increase in reliability. Not in grand gestures, not in buying her the flowers or offering her the big vacation that she's always wanted, just showing up each day with a willing attitude. Be the kind of man who's easy to come back to, who's easy to connect to. Be the kind of man that when she texts back and forth with you, she thinks to herself, that went well. That was pleasant. When she has the hard talk with you, she thinks, wow, I thought he was going to take that really bad, but he took that surprisingly well. Be that sort of guy. Be that sort of guy. And then again, go back to our previous episode. Define who you want to be on this journey. Please go back and do that if you haven't already. You need to have a clear vision, not just for where you want to go. Yes, I know we want to reconcile, but who do we want to be whether we end up reconciling or divorcing? Who is that man? You better know him. You better be able to talk about him. You better be able to think about him. You better be able to adapt him to the different scenarios that might come your way. I know some of you, you're not early in a separation, nor are you new to Husband Help Haven. You might be thinking to yourself, I've been doing all this. She still won't come back. She still hasn't come back, at least. I hear you. I know. I'm not promising you that she will. All the same, I'll tell you that a man who leads with integrity, and you already know this if you've been around for a while, you've probably already experienced this, but I'm going to say it all the same. A man who leads with integrity, who changes because it's right, who changes because he wants to leave a positive mark on the world around him, no matter who actually falls into that sphere of impact. We just want there to be impact. That man is going to be okay either way. That man who sows to his integrity during separation will be okay either way. The man who sows to his insecurity during separation is going to find himself on the other side of whatever outcome, reconciliation or divorce, with very much the same issues, same patterns, same insecurities still at large in his life. And I'll tell you, I've seen guys get to reconciliation like that. And I've seen guys get to divorce with their integrity higher than ever. So this is not about outcome dependence. This is not about outcome guarantees. The only outcome I'm guaranteeing is that you won't regret taking it upon yourself to be a man who takes proactivity seriously in your life, who seeks to be a better and better leader in the love you bring to the people in your life, not just the physical things that you do. Now, if you want a little more direction, if you want to explore what this idea of leadership looks like, specifically in separation, I would recommend that you go and check out my course, Peace and Control. It is all about exactly that. We're going to build from the foundation up to the application, exactly what it looks like to lead well and love well when you're the only one trying to save your marriage. I'm not going to give you the whole spiel here. Go check out husbandhelphaven.com/course. So COURSE, husbandhelphaven.com/course, and you can learn more about that. I think it's an excellent resource for anybody who, if you are newly separated, this is going to be a way to fast track your way to stability. If you've been in separation a while, you're going to find in that course a very comprehensive understanding of how I personally approach and strategize around building connection through separation. So again, if that's interesting to you, husbandhelphaven.com/course. But either way, whether you go and do that or not, I hope that this episode has served to you as both a source of sort of conviction, but also motivation Because even though, like we talked about, your wife is more likely to leave, and some of you are living in that reality, that statistic is your life right now. I also want to remind you what that statistic also tells us is that she's more likely to respond to genuine leadership, to genuine, sincere, proactive love being poured into the relationship. In this episode, we sort of did the reality check. We talked about the warning. We also talked about the silver lining of that warning. But in the next episode, we're going to go deeper and we are going to specifically explore more about what this concept of husbandly leadership looks like in practice. Like, what is the actual posture that you're bringing to your relationship? Can we get a little bit more specific about that? What's the heart behind this man that you want to be as you're going through really hard stuff in your marriage and in your life right now? Because what I've realized is that most husbands, again, they don't struggle with feeling love for their wives. They love their wives. The thing that they struggle with is understanding or visualizing or implementing the actual application of love. They have the noun side, they feel the love, they just don't do the love, or at least not in ways that result in her feeling loved. So we're going to talk more about all that stuff in the next episode where we conclude our little mini sub series within our bigger series, specifically about what your duties are as a man, as a husband in your marriage. Either way, though, I hope that you got something out of listening to this. Thank you for being the sort of man who cares enough to about his marriage and about being a better man to listen to an episode like this. So I appreciate it. I know, and I count it really honestly a privilege to be able to sit here talking to you. So thank you so much for being here, guys. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next time to talk more about what it looks like to love well and be the best man that you can be, no matter what your marriage is like right now. Much manly love, guys. We'll see you.